Okay, water allocation. So at the moment we use our summer 7-day Q95 to validate allocation, and it's not a bad practice in that it takes uses statistics from over the 6-month irrigation season to quantify how much water can be sustainably allocated from our streams and rivers. So this is mostly about surface water allocation. Summer 7-day Q95, it says what amount of water is in our rivers for 95% of the time during the irrigation season, which runs from the 1st of November through to the 30th of April. So that 6-month window it's sort of called the irrigation season. And how much water is in a certain river for 95% of the time during that 6-month period. And then we take the minimum flow, I guess, and if we have an example with the Ngātaroto, minimum flow on the Ngātaroto is 2,400 litres per second. And then the difference between the minimum flow and that summer 7-day Q95 figure, that becomes the allocation. So from memory, the allocation in the Ngātaroto, the figure they come up with was 956,000 cubic metres per week. 156, yeah, somewhere around 956,156 cubic metres per week. And then if we then go and say, okay, we want more water left in the river, or we want the minimum flow elevated or raised, what that does, it does away with the current allocation regime, because the higher minimum flow will mean less water available using that summer 7-day Q95 figure. And so how do we reconcile our request or our aspirations for higher minimum flow when we don't have another allocation regime? Council through tank plan change is saying, the allocation will be based on actual and reasonable use, and water demand is somewhere in there as well. But water demand isn't mentioned in the Resource Management Act. It's sort of a demand to me is about wants and what I want. What do I demand? What is the water? What is the amount of water that people want to take from the river rather than what can be sustainably allocated from the river? So one of the things that we've been looking at, there's two things actually. One is that we need to have a total instantaneous rate of take from the river. What is the amount of water that can be taken from the river on a sustainable basis in terms of litres per second? When you look at the quantity figure in the operative regional plan for the Ngātaroto, so say we take another look at that 956,000 cubic metres per week. If we translate that or transfer that into litres per second, we come up with a figure of 1,581 litres per second. So to me that is sort of a sustainable figure. The problem with the Ngātaroto is that Regional Council is allocated over and above the total allocation for the Ngātaroto, and by doing that they've increased the total instantaneous rate of take from 1,581 litres per second up to somewhere around 3,300 litres per second. So it's sort of like doubled the rate of take, because they've said that they've granted additional consents sort of, but at a higher cut-off flow. And they've done this also for the Karamu and for other catchments as well. And so the rate of depletion has increased, and that leads to faster decline in water quantity and less resilience, I guess, for the river. So the river declines at a faster rate than it should be, and then we get irrigation bans coming on more often and of longer duration than they used to be. So before the amount of water got vastly increased, I guess from around 2000. So if you look at previous records for the Ngātaroto up to about the year 2000, there were hardly any irrigation bans on the Ngātaroto. Between 1975, 1970 and 1995, the flow in the Ngātaroto only dropped below 3,000 litres per second on one or two occasions. And that's over a 25-year period. And then between 2000 and now, there's been a vast increase of around 700%. Overall, throughout the region, there's about 700%. And so that means that water's coming out at a faster rate than the river can actually accommodate. And that's resulted in, I guess, habitat decline and less habitat available for fish and birds and the aquatic insects and general ecosystem health overall. So how do we fix that up? We have to come up with another allocation model that is environmentally sound, based on mātauranga Māori and Western science together, and then embed that within the plan. Also, the state of the rivers now is somewhere, it's like water's being taken out for profit, but what is the profit given back to the river? So to be fair, I think there's a viable reason for imposing a management charge for our rivers. At the moment, council, I guess they rate for certain things around rivers, but there's more monitoring required from councils and from Māori. So there's the cost of monitoring, environmental monitoring. There's also mitigation or restoration of different parts of the river. We are currently, who pays for that? I think a lot of it is imposed on the general ratepayer rather than on the people who benefit from water allocation. So I'm looking at something like a 4 cent per cubic metre charge, and that can then be divided up between council with their management role, and the other 2 cents per cubic metre can perhaps contribute to cultural monitoring and tree planting programs, research, a little bit of environmental education so that the coming generations can reconnect with the awa as well. So those types of things, and the ability to charge for management purposes is there in the RMA. And how do we work that into the tank plan change, and at what level? That would be the big question, I guess, around water allocation and rehabilitation of our awa.